also have every ism that you can think of out there. You probably have heard of it as a problem with navigation and so on. You have favoritism, you have nepotism, every one of these isms. And then the other problem, and this also exists with public schools and BIE, is you have what's called the dance of the lemons. And that's where you have people that bounce from school to school, and it results in negative outcomes for students. And they seem to almost like recycle the same people that exist. And this is not just a problem that exists only just in grand schools or BIE, but it's also an issue with public schools and other school systems all across the country. And when it comes to language and culture, as it was brought up as something that's very important, when it comes to a lot of our schools, that is often the last thing on the school's priority list, the to-do list. In many cases, a lot of these schools treat it as a stepchild, that it's not important, that when it comes to budget cuts or priorities, it's one of the first things that gets cut, rather than being a vital part of the school's curriculum and program. And at least our experience working with some of the schools that are low performing is they often tell the navigation, you stay out of our business. We're a local control, we're a local school board. And the nation, in many cases, is trying to step up to the plate to help our schools, because these are our schools and our students. But in this case, the politics seems to play a much more important role. And then you have a lot of local school boards that seem to think that the Tribally Controlled Schools Act, Local Law 100-297, means it's the Local School Board Act. Actually, it's not the case. And going back to that picture that I showed up here, about having 34 different, in many school districts, and some of these schools probably just have 100 students, maybe 200. So when you have all this money that goes into many school districts, a lot of it gets taken away or sucked up by administration or other things that should instead of going into the classroom, which is going to have the greatest impact for effects. And eventually we'll get to numbers that sort of illustrate how much money goes into navigable education. And this is one of the other profiles when it comes to talking about student achievement. And again, going back to what was brought up earlier, the reason why we're going through all of this is because of this. And these are some of the information that comes off the Government Accountability Report, and that's the report where BIE took some pretty big hits. And it highlights some of the different factors about where students who attend BIE schools, whether it's a BIE operated school such as many farms, and as well as grant schools. That's the sort of the same comparison. And those are the average graduation rates that were recently calculated. And now to test scores to sort of illustrate the picture. And right now, the data that we have is presented just for the schools that operate under the authority of the navigation, and those are the tribally controlled schools. And as you can see, this is the tribal data that has existed for the past 10 years for all navigation schools, at least within Arizona. This is excluding the BIE operating schools, just to give you that comparison. But this has been the trend data for reading. And the assessment that's used in this case is AIMS. So that's the common assessment for all these schools as a whole. And this is what the average math scores are for Arizona grant schools. And as you can see, it's been stuck in the 20s. And things have gone the other direction, flatlined. And this is the trend data for New Mexico grant schools for reading. And the assessment that New Mexico uses is the New Mexico Standards-Based Assessment, which this year is going to change to PAR. And this is what the math scores are for tribally controlled schools in New Mexico. And of course, when you look at this and you figure that when you only have 20% of students who are on grade level that only have the skills necessary to succeed, I mean, and then you have 80% of students that don't have the skills. I mean, these are serious questions that often get asked up at the national level. It's not so much Congress that asks what is local school or A, B, C going to do to improve outcomes. question that Congress, the policymakers at the national level ask is, what is the navigation going to do? Because these are your schools. And this is a school-by-school comparison over the past 3 years of schools that we have data for. And as you can see, you have schools that are all over the place. And the thing that you have to almost sort of look at and think about is that each of these students, they pretty much have the same demographic, same background. They probably live out in a rural part of the reservation or a rural community, live off the beaten path. But then you have outcomes. Why is it that certain schools have entirely different outcomes? They're performing up here, but then let's say the school down the street or a highway has an entirely different outcome in the other direction. And it's going back to the system that was described where you have 34 different schools going in different directions, rather than having a uniform, consistent system in place, like with curriculum and professional development, etc. They have results where results are all over the place. And this is what reading test scores are like for New Mexico schools on a school-by-school basis. And it's quite alarming to see or have schools in the single digits. So, I mean, at the end of all this discussion and debate about politics, about power, it's about this. This is what the nation, this is what Doty, this is what we're going through, all this about. This is what we're trying to change. And this is what math proficiency scores for all these schools in Arizona. And this is what math scores are like for New Mexico grad schools. And this is the other thing that we're also doing, because part of what we're trying to do is research by doing comparisons of different school systems. And this is data that comes out of that compares Arizona BIE schools versus the grant schools. And this is what the trend data has been for the past 3 years. And on the other side, there's New Mexico BIE operated schools versus the tribal control schools, the grant schools. And it's interesting to see. And this is what the results are in math. And right now, this information is just based on the passing rates of students who tested proficient plus advanced. And as you can see, that Arizona BID schools are, in contrast to the grant schools, are having overall a much different outcome. And then you have the results for New Mexico BID schools versus grant schools in math. And then we also have Utah there. We have a Utah BID operated school and a Utah BID, or Utah tribal control school, a grant school. And this is one of the other interesting comparisons. Because all these schools, like if you know where these schools are located at, they're all down US Highway 491 toward Gallup, in between Shiprock and Gallup. If you've ever traveled that road between like Newcomb all the way down to Gallup, I mean, and you just look at where a lot of students live, where their families come from, you would almost think that these students pretty much have a challenging home life, a challenging demographic. They probably have domestic violence, probably have a dysfunctional home, single parent, mom, dad, etc. But then when you look at outcomes on a school-by-school basis, and you look at the kind of, and you compare it to let's say that these students' challenges that they come in from, why is it that these students have different results just based on the schools that they go to? And here, these are just schools that are right along the highway, one on top of the mountain. But the bottom line is that these students are pretty much the same. But then you have one school that, at Newcomb Elementary, that had probably one of the best results in northern New Mexico. It was one of only 2 A-rated schools in San Juan County. Even though it's kind of interesting, that even though that school is out in the middle of nowhere, that school did pretty well. And it actually outperformed schools located in the best parts of Farmington, with a lot more resources, a lot more homes, a lot more jobs, with the golf courses. Parents were making $100,000 a year. This school did it, so it shows that things are possible. And then you go to the school that's located just on the highway, and you have a different result, just based on what's going on at the school level. And then you go down to Tohatchee and on top of the mountain. This is evident. And the assessment that's common to sort of put in the back of mind is that the test that these students took is the same one that other students took at each of these schools. But then when you look at what happens at the school, it's always interesting. And this is just with middle schools right along that same corridor, which is interesting. And you have a middle school that has test scores that are 4 times higher than the school that's 20 miles down the highway, and the one that's also on top of the mountain. And then you have a tribally controlled school that has a different outfit, that's under a different accountability system. And this is Newcomb High School versus some of the other schools, like Tohatchee and Everpine. But the thing is that what is it that schools do differently to get different outcomes? And this is the other sort of case study that we put together here. And who here knows where Tuba City is? Probably all you guys. What's interesting about this is, if you think about it, students go to Tuba City, they probably grew up together, they live in the same neighborhood, they probably play basketball together, they come from the same home, they face the same drama, same issues, single-parent home, all this stuff. I mean, even when you think of putting that aside and think about what's going on, why is it that the school that's down the street or across the street have entirely different outcomes? And this is some of the results that we're able to pull up from that. And so you have a BAE-operated school, and then you have a public school, and then you have a grant school. So if you think about it, these students all come from the same neighborhood, same community. But what is it that is happening at the school level? Where students who go to one school have better outcomes and results than some of the others who go to different schools. So part of what this study, what this research about is, how do we replicate patterns in schools of success like this across the nation? So rather than just having this exist just at one school, part of this plan about how we build a Navajo education system is how we create schools like this all over the place. And this is what the math scores are like of Tuba City versus the public school and the grant school. And the results are interesting. And at least what has a great deal to do with each of these schools is who's in charge of the school, the adult, the teachers, who's in charge of the school. Those are the factors that have the greatest impact, or the factors that schools and school leaders have the greatest control over, is who's in the school on a day-to-day basis, who's in the classroom on a day-to-day basis that has great impact. And of course, there are other things in place, such as curriculum about professional development, having something that's having a curriculum aligned to standards. All that is, of course, tied in, but it raises a lot of thoughts about what's going on, about what's working and what's not. And the policy environment on navigation is this. At least with the tribally controlled schools, the grant schools, there's a process called reauthorization. And the way it works is tribally controlled schools, the local school boards, when they decide to become a grant school, they take it upon themselves to say that we agree to abide by federal law, that we agree to abide by navigation law, and so in that respect they exist because the navigation allows them to exist under the authority of the nation.